vamos a trabajar todo lo que tiene que ver con personal leadership y global leadership. El segundo, Dennis. Hi, Dennis. Good morning. Dennis has been, Dennis ha trabajado. Could you put your headset? So at least you know what I'm saying about.
She's worried. Yeah.
Bueno, básicamente Dennis es el líder global de la práctica de Leadership Development de Conferri. Él ha estado trabajando con nosotros desde marzo de este año, ya ha venido trabajando en varias sesiones con nosotros, con el equipo del comité de gerencia, y básicamente es un experto en el tema. Él ha montado todo lo que es la escuela de liderazgo y todo el currículo de liderazgo de Shell, también de Philips, de J&J, de Nike, de Harley, y así so on and so forth. Cuando yo empecé mi carrera, la verdad lo conocí aquí a través de Conferri, pero yo trabajé muchos años en Shell, y cuando yo era analista, él era el que allá en Holanda creaba todos esos programas, y desde analista fui usuario de muchas de las creaciones que él tuvo. El segundo día nos acompaña el profesor Shehzad, es un pakistaní, y vamos a hablar bastante sobre perspectiva a largo plazo y creación de valor, cuáles son las palancas creadoras de valor. De verdad es una sesión bastante interesante. Y el tercer día volvemos con Dennis sobre Long Term Perspective. Vamos a hablar un poco de la toma de decisiones, vamos a hablar un poco sobre pensamiento sistémico, vamos a hablar un poco sobre paradojas, es prácticamente lo que vivimos a este nivel bastante desde los días, cómo nos enfrentamos a mantener un buen nivel de inventario, sin embargo sin impactar la entrega de producto final, y así como otras paradojas vamos a hacer algunos ejercicios, y como también a veces en esa toma de decisión, por más que tenemos que tomarla rápido, a veces el problema está en framear el problema, realmente hacernos las preguntas correctas antes de arrancar a la ejecución. Entonces realmente es unos 3 días bastante interesantes. La invitación, como siempre, o sea, hay 1000 cosas afuera, seguramente los equipos nos van a estar demandando. En la medida de lo posible, por favor, mantengámonos conectados. Esto es prácticamente más que una capacitación. Es parte del rol de ser director en la organización, es usar este tiempo para desconectarse, para pensar. O sea, no es un adicional, pero hace parte de nuestro rol realmente invertir en nuestro propio desarrollo. Si necesitan salir, pues obviamente feel free, pero sí, si realmente es más de 1 hora, media hora, por favor nos avisan, porque hay bastante impacto en las actividades, porque es contenido, actividad, y realmente estaría impactando todo el flow de los 3 días. Hablé ya un poco de los 2 profesores, pero cada uno de ellos se va a presentar. Y básicamente, ya este tema, un poquito de cuántas son estas horas de actividad que vamos a tener. Y de nuevo, la riqueza también la hacen ustedes compartiendo, haciendo las preguntas correctas, no hay pregunta correcta o incorrecta, pero realmente participando muchísimo. Y básicamente este creo que es el mensaje. Realmente bienvenidos, y más allá de todo lo que tendremos que avanzar y estudiar, disfrutemos estos días, que de verdad, muchas gracias a todo el equipo por la preparación, todo el behind the scenes, el equipo de Conferri, profesores, las personas del hotel. Así que, bueno, Dennis, I think that's it for me.
Good morning. Have you ever been to or have you heard of those training programs where you go out in the woods and you sit and you relax and you think, and you may do some activities together? Have you heard of those? This is not one of those. So if you saw from the screen, it's actually a lot of intensity around Global mindset today, personal reflections of your leadership in a global context. So we start with you. You'll go to business acumen, value creation, which is also an intense day. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then day 3, you'll recall from your pre-work, we said bring a big decision, a hard decision with you. We're going to work on using some senior executive decision-making processes. We're going to talk about the biases that teams typically fall in. So each day is going to be an intense burst of practice and some new ideas. So, because my Spanish is terrible, you do have headsets, and I teach global mindset a lot, and I think nobody understands what's it like to sit all day in a language that's not your mother tongue and talk about intense subjects. It's very difficult. So please do use the headsets for the translation if it's helpful. If not, that's fine, but I think at the end of the days, sometimes it's hard, right? And tomorrow, you'll have Shahzad. And he is from Pakistan, but honestly, he's from Emory, so he's lived in the U.S. and the South for decades now. So he doesn't quite have a Southern accent from the U.S., but it's close. He's probably the best I have ever seen on talking about business models, how they result into financial models, the choices you make with strategy. And so he'll talk about P&L, which is what most leaders, that's where we come from, right? P&L. But he'll also talk about balance sheet. And do you really understand the impact of the markets on the balance sheet versus the P&L and the choices in the business? Are we a products business? Are we a services business? What do those choices mean in terms of the financials? So Shahzad's day, I think you'll find it to be very interesting and very enlightening. And he knows a lot about Alicorp. He's looked at your results. He reviews all the financials. You will not out-finance this guy. So if you have any questions or you want to challenge him, he'll love it. It'll be a great day. Now, I was a little slow getting my headset on. Did Margarita talk about why we're starting with long-term perspective and global mindset? Why do you think we're starting there? Why aren't we starting with clients or innovation?
Maybe to open our mind.
To open our mind. And
we need to change.
And we can be better. Yeah, these are 2 places we can be better. Exactly. I think there are 2. We're starting here also, I think you probably believe you have a good understanding of your customers. And you're pretty customer focused. The nature of your business keeps you that way. You have a history of product innovations, and so there are some ways that we have some recipes that work. They're just ways of working that work for us. So what we're going to start with are 2 areas that you can be stronger in, but they're also about your mindset. So we're going to start about global mindset. And when we talk about long-term perspective, we're going to talk about your sort of strategic mindset. How much future are you illuminating? How much landscape are you illuminating? We'll come back around to some of these other topics, innovation, customers, but what we want to do is start having you think about shifting the way you think about some topics. So when we come back to the topics that you know well, then you can look at them a little differently. Does that make sense? So we're starting there for that reason, and so they are the ones that will require cognitive capacity. When we talk about global mindset, we're going to talk about social, interpersonal issues, intrapersonal issues, but we're going to talk a lot about you today. We're going to talk a lot about how you think about business tomorrow, and we're going to talk a lot about how you think about decision making and managing what appear to be impossibly at odds issues. How can you have profitable growth? How can you innovate and reduce cost? Those are the kinds of tensions you face every day, and we're going to talk about how we think about those a little differently on the 3rd day. These are lined up with your strategic pillars, 1 for 1. There's no accident that growth, efficiency, and people are sitting in the forefront, and these capabilities line up right behind them. And I should have started with this. Everybody has your book. You're going to find 3 tabs in here. One says, here's the workbook. One says, here are the references and slides. So most of these second 2 tabs are reference material. You go there as you have interest. I'm actually going to encourage you not to look ahead. Don't ruin the surprise as we go through. So these are so you have everything, but most of our time is going to be spent right behind this purple tab called Workbook. Most of our time. So, of course, I broke the one I have already. So most of our time is going to be spent here in the workbook. And if you looked at about page 6 or 7, that's where I am right now. So I'm right about there. There's plenty of room for you to take notes. What you will find is not a high density of content, but lots of rooms for you to take notes. Another thing about the facilitation style in these next few days, sometimes I'm going to say, does everybody have a pen? And that's faculty code for you should write this down. So when I say, does everybody have a pen? This is usually a time to take notes as we go through. And what you'll find along here, as I say, there are plenty of places to take notes. So why do you think I encourage you to write things down? Why do you think?
Because it's important insight that you are share for us, share with us.
It's important insight. Also, and everything I'm telling you as we go through these 3 days are things you can use with your teams. You are 65% more likely to do something with information you write down in your own words. You're 65% more likely to do something than if I just give you the handout, right? That bounces off. But if I can get you to take notes, if I can get you to not keep going into the slides and reading, but actually taking notes, you're synthesizing, and it starts to get more real for you. So I'm going to ask you to take notes because that's how it sticks whenever we learn these new concepts and ideas. The objectives, you'll find these also in your book, but the objectives are to get insights into diverse aspects of business culture and geographies. We're going to talk about your definition of global leadership. We're going to deepen your understanding of global mindset and global leadership skills. So we're actually going to do a little self-assessment and practice a little bit of your global leadership skills. And we're going to talk about that link between finance, strategy, and operational execution. How do we illuminate more landscape? But do we understand the fundamental business model we operate in, and how might that be different in different markets? One of the interesting conversations that we talked about in our first director program was you have different hurdle rates for different investments in different countries. So how does that look in a global set? How do we think about that across different borders when we make bets in the business? And how is that seen from the outside? Best practices for quality decisions. We're going to start with a senior executive decision-making process and about 5 or 6 of the big biases that senior leaders fall into often. And then we're going to talk about your leadership skills. And we're going to talk about how you convert your insights into action as we go. What is it that activates you? And again, whenever we say, how will you take these insights you've learned back to work, every one of those techniques are techniques you'll use with your leaders, right? They're easy to apply. All right. You're going to be getting some different materials along the way. You've got your binder today. We also have a set of tips from Global Mindset that we put together. You'll get those. There's a short little one-pager that summarizes many of the ideas, so there's plenty of support materials sitting behind the face-to-face sessions. So, rules of engagement. And when I say rules of engagement, I mean how will we act, how will we be when we're here together. So, be present. Now, as a longtime teacher with executives, there was a phenomenon you'll all know. We used to call it the BlackBerry prayer. But when I see you sitting like this, just because your phone is under the table, I know what you're doing, right? So we're going to ask you to be present when you're here. Respect confidentiality. That means what you say here stays here. I mean, you should have open, honest conversations about how hard it is. the challenges, the difficulties, the big issues, the questions. And that we have straight talk, that we're okay with a little bit of friction, that we can have different views, right? And when we talk about global mindset, the heart of global mindset is influencing others unlike yourself. The heart of the idea. So this idea of us having straight talk and being okay with a little bit of friction should be good. And then manage our energy. We're going to try to take good breaks on time. We're going to take lunch on time. We're going to try to end on time. But we want you to manage your energy because as it dips in the natural flow. What else? When we think about rules of engagement or rules of the road for the next 3 days, what else will be important for us? It could be good if we learn something. I think, yeah, let's check. Participate. Yeah, if when we see our colleagues, they're thinking but maybe not speaking up, let's encourage people to speak up, right? We actually, no matter how many years I do this, what do you think the #1 value that people remember the following year is? What is it they remember about their 3 days? The time they spent with each other. So you'll learn some new ideas, you'll try some new things, but actually the high value is the conversations I had with groups of my colleagues that were not in my traditional work context, that we just talked about things that were important to the business and to us. So be present in the way that you participate. What else? Okay, well for me, I would say let's have some fun, because you all look pretty serious. So then learning isn't deadly serious, but I do think along the way, we ought to be able to have some fun. I promise you, once we get into your self-assessment on the global mindset, it's going to get fun. We're going to talk a lot about that, yeah. Anything else? Now, as part of the pre-work, we ask you to reflect on these ideas. And I'd like you to now, just on your, in your books, I want you to just take a few notes. If you brought some notes with you, fantastic. But I want you to write down, when we think about global leadership, what does this mean to you in your role? When we talk about value creation, what does this mean to me? What does value creation mean to me? And when we talk about decision making, what does that mean to me? Just write down 1 line or 2, no more. But when I think about this idea, what does it mean to me? And then we're going to have a little conversation about those. Here's your first test. For global leadership, I want you to write your idea down on the pink sticky. What is it you think about there? For decision making, I want you to use the yellow. Write down your idea on the yellow sticky. And then for value creation, I want you to write down your idea on the green sticky. Now, in a moment, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to break you into 3 groups, and I'm going to have you come up as a group and synthesize what the class says when they think about decision making. Another group, what does they think about value creation? And you're going to come up with 2 or 3 big ideas. What does this represent? And when you do that, I want you to do your introductions. So if you don't know everybody, then introduce yourself and just do that work, and then we'll talk about it as a class. But what we'll do is we'll get to know each other as we learn about leadership and ourselves. I want to make a learning point first. What is self-insight? What is self-insight?
Just see ourselves.
Our perspective based on our...
Oh, we see, he took the safe way. He said the way we see ourselves. Excellent, thanks. What else?
Our perspective based on our experience.
Our perspective based on our perspective of?
Based on our own experience.
Our own experience, but it's how we see the world through our own experience. It is a level of us understanding ourselves. So I want to make a distinction as we go through these next 3 days about self-insight versus self-awareness. And it'll be important for our personal leadership as we think about it. So that's right. Self-insight is, do I really get it about me? Do I really understand what I'm good at and what I'm not good at? Because routinely, one of the biggest derailers for senior leaders in organizations is they step over a line and start making decisions in areas that they're not good at. Because they're asked every day to make decisions, every 10 minutes. Your day is cut up into chunks of 10 or 15 minutes and you're making hundreds of decisions. One of the biggest derailers for executives is a lack of self-insight. Do you really understand what I'm good at and what I'm not? When should I ask and when should I say? So if self-insight is understanding what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, what's self-awareness? What's self-awareness?
It's more related to our leadership style. Am I really aware about my leadership style or something like this?
Yeah, you're still a little bit over here. For you to be aware in the moment, then we start getting over here. Right? Self-insight is, do I understand? Anything else? Self-awareness.
Our behaviors.
Our behaviors. So this is, do I get it? This is what's it look like when I do it. When we get over to this side. Self-insight, do I understand myself? Do I get where I'm good and not good? Self-awareness is, can I catch myself in the moment, change my behavior, and get to a different outcome? These next 3 days, you're going to be getting a lot of insight. There's lots of new ideas. There's lots of interesting reading. You're going to hear interesting conversations. That's all insight. It's interesting for you. But if you can't catch yourself in the moment and change your behavior to try something new, then you haven't moved over here yet. People have insight every day. They hear something new and something interesting. The challenge for us over the next 3 days is self-awareness. How will I ever use this in the moment at work? How will I use this in my next team meeting to make them think differently? All right, so I'm going to give you my example. Has anybody here skied? Has anybody here ever skied before? No skiing, okay. So when you are young, when you're a kid or when you're first skiing, they teach you a technique. And they call it, if you're a kid, they call it the pizza, or they call it this triangle. But you have to put your skis like this. You have to push the inside edges down and they're in a bit of a point because it's the most stable. When you get like this, they fall over. So they teach you this technique and it's hard work. So imagine I'm an executive coach. Many years ago, I'm taking a woman that I'm dating to Colorado and we're going to go skiing. So I ski, she doesn't. I'm a coach. Surely I can teach her some basics about skiing. Can you feel where this is going already? Yeah. So imagine now, fast forward, first morning, 10 o'clock, she's covered with snow. We're on the top of a small hill and her legs are shaking because she just spent an hour and a half pushing these skis down the hill like this, which is hard work on your legs. And I'm saying, oh, it's going to get better. When your skis are parallel, we're going to be able to ski together more. And she looks at me and she says, why don't you just go? So I turn to go down the hill. Right when I turned to go down the hill, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? Put yourself in my place. What do you think I was thinking when I turned to leave her on the hill? Yeah, I was thinking this was a big mistake, leaving her up here by herself. And I paid for that for the rest of that weekend. It was a big mistake. Did I have self-insight? Did I know better? Did I know I shouldn't leave her there? I had self-insight. Did I have self-awareness? No, I couldn't change my behavior to get to a different place. Okay, so fast forward a couple of years, different woman. I'm teaching at Duke University. We're going to go out to dinner. She's supposed to come to my house at 5 p.m. But she's not at my house at 5 p.m. And she's not at my house at 10 minutes after 5. And she's not at my house at 5:30. So she drives up to my house at about 5:35, 35 minutes late. What was I thinking? You're being very polite. I was thinking, you are so late. And there's people waiting, and we have to drive to dinner. What did I say? Yeah, I said, you look very nice tonight. Self-insight? Self-awareness? Can you catch yourself in the moment, change your behavior to get to a different outcome? This is the magic of learning and application of learning for all of us and as executives, right? So this won't be enough. You're going to hear great ideas today. We're going to have to get you to where you got it, it makes sense, and you change your behavior. All right, that's as funny as I am. This is it. So you're going to have to work with this level of humor through the next 3 days as we go. All right. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you 5 to be value creation. So if you'll go back here to the board, I'd like you to go through those stickies, and I want you to come up with the 2 or 3 big ideas. What does a Class A value creation means here? And I'd like, how about you 2 come over here with you 3, and you decision making, and then you are global mindset. So come on up. Let's take about 10 or 15 minutes. If you know each other, great. If not, make sure you introduce yourselves. 2 or 3 of the big ideas. What do we think about this concept? What do we think about this idea? So I just want to point out that this team was done in like 3.5 minutes. We're just going to check the speed and quality formula now.
Okay, so for value creation, we found a lot of insights here that we group in 3 different, I would say, areas. The first one is it's profitability. So we have profitability and shareholder return, which is the first one. The other one, it's customer satisfaction. No? So we have a clear focus on developing products to satisfy customer needs. And the third one, it's sustainability. So at the end of the day, we came up with a kind of circle, because everything is related here. We need to develop products that are suitable for our customers, that are sustainable at the same time, and that will allow the company to make profit out of them. So that's basically a summary of all the insights that we found here.
You don't have value creation if you don't have all these 3 things.
Nice. So we'd say, when we talk about value creation,
Yeah. Exactly.
right, it's here.
Exactly.
It's right here. And if we can always find 1 or 2, but that's, when we talk about value creation, you need all 3.
Exactly.
Sits in the middle. And was everybody aligned, or did you have 16 different views, or were they pretty?
No, we basically group all the insights that we found here, because if we look at the top, for example, these 5 are related to profitability. Here we have growth, we have profitability, we have shareholder return. Then all of these are related to customers. And then we have another group that are related to sustainability. So that's why we made this kind of summary, and then we realized that that's basically a good summary of our strategy, because this is pretty much what Alicorp is doing today.
Nice. And we have a couple questions I want to just, while we're together talking about each one. One is, those are the important themes. Is this a strength of ours at AliCorp? Are we pretty good at finding that center point? Is that part of our core? Or could we be stronger?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
That's so pretty good.
Yeah, I think we're very good on focusing on customers and getting profits out of these products that we are developing. And today that we are working on the purpose, we are growing a little bit more on the sustainability.
In AliCorp, we are
part.
beginning our race to sustainability.
That's what I would have said is that I would have said, I think you've got this.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would have said, are we all aligned here?
That's a work in process.
Yeah.
That's a work in process. And that's what we are very good at it.
Yeah, we got the customer. And would you say we are very current and relevant on the customer? So in other words, do we think about digital customers, millennials, different profiles, the shifting? Are we staying up to the?
That's a work in progress.
Yes.
And that's why we are here.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be. We said straight talk. So I would have said there's probably part of this picture you're very good at.
Yeah.
It's the core of your success. There's probably part of that
In a
customer
very traditional
picture.
way.
Yeah. And when we start thinking about nomads, young nomads in China, U.S. salsa, there's probably still, we haven't illuminated everything we need. How will they buy exactly? What are the taste? But if it's the taste, if it's traditional, you got it locked. Where would you say on the sustainability, when you say it's a work in progress, are we 20%? Are we 80%? How far are we?
10%?
AliCorp has created this area
Yes.
maybe 2 years ago.
20.
Only 2 years ago.
That is more than we know.
Sostenibilidad tiene un año. Como años.
Un año.
Ya tiene menos, tiene meses, pero sostenibilidad existe hace mucho
Sí,
tiempo.
pero formalizada.
So in my experience, companies, you are at the beginning of a global journey. But whenever I hear, probably everybody doesn't know everything that's happening, right? So there's probably 100% some places and 2%, right? And so in there, right, in there is the work of directors, right? So if I were going to say, how much time do we have to spend here? This conversation is probably about what other business models, how else do you make money than the way we know how to make money? This is probably about what's in this half that we ought to all stay a little bit aligned and understanding. And this story down here is what is the common understanding beyond the concepts, right? So sustainability is often thought about as two ways. One is you build a series of bricks. You have these blocks you put in place and they make the use case. You say, we do these things, and they build a value proposition, right, that gets you there. Or you say, it's a value. It's just who we are. We just do it because it's part of who we are as people, right? But whenever you are there, whenever this is not a question mark, I think that's one story. My guess is you are not quite halfway to the journey on that yet. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Good. So part of the value you're going to hear me say, and part of the journey for us on the next 3 days is, how do we align and we think about some of these ideas together so we're stronger together as directors? But also, what is the second speed is, what is it for me personally as a leader that I need to be stronger in? And so I'm going to keep pushing you along the way. This is the kind of thing we all need to understand together. And along the way, you should have 2 or 3 things you say, I actually could be stronger over or wherever that is. Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Nice job. Nice job. Thank you. All right.
This is the way to reach the good businesses. First one is how we are.
Mm-hmm. Like inside who we are without thinking.
How AliCorp is.
Yep.
This is our capability. but we have to make some changes in order to reach the opportunity in the other countries to make best businesses.
Nice. So on the far left, are those like when we do global leadership, it looks like that? Those are more specific things you see?
The last one?
Yeah, what are these?
Gain share market.
It's like business
By some
in a
company.
different
Okay,
context.
so just concrete business choices, geography.
It's like you understand.
Role profitability.
It's like you understand behaviors, you understand the context, and then you can do business.
Yeah.
But with
Nice.
a good understanding of both of them.
Very nice. Very nice. Any questions? There's a difference here. We just started. There's a difference here between, I'm going to call this Alicorp culture, and I'm going to call this, I don't know what, country?
Yeah.
Something like that. Because my distant view of you today is that those two things are almost the same. That you are Peru and you are Alicorp. And we have these, I know. And we have, but I have a feeling that Peru is the center, that's how we say, the sun, around which there are orbiting planets. And as you move into US salsas, or you move into China, or you go to other countries, then parts of that first column have to be transportable. There are things about who we are that are important in these markets that are a part of our success formula. And those will get further away from Peru, the Peru culture itself. And those things will become more and more distinct as you get more global. But today, my sense is they are a little commingled. If I'm being unfair, you can just say, no, that's not true.
Well, I think we have a lot of work to do. Yeah, we are, when we think Alicorp, we think Peru. That's true. And it's not just Peru, it's just another country.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I don't think that's unusual for one of the things we're going to talk about after the break is some companies choose a global local approach, that is global standards applied locally. Harley-Davidson. Mm-hmm. This is the way a Harley-Davidson is, and we might tune it for the local market, but others do local global. And they say you take the best practices in a local, and then you move regional. And then you take those best practices regionally, and then you move more. But you start from what works and go this way. So two different directions. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of that. Right now, I think you're more in that direction of we took the best of Peru, and now we're going to best of the region. And now we're looking out at how does that export. Any other questions here? Oh, I want to talk a little. Yeah, please.
Yeah. When we are talking about global leadership, when we talk about different cultures also inside the country, for example, Alicorp is a fusion of 3 different organizations
Businesses, yeah.
with different cultures. And in all these years, Alicorp was buying and acquiring new companies, new organizations, and all have different cultures.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Talk about this definition inside the country, or is also from other countries?
Well, let's just add that to this messy mix that you have, because I'm gonna talk after the break about in bucket 1. There are things that are true for every human. They're just true, like food, shelter, Maslow's needs hierarchy. It's true for everyone around the world. In bucket 2, there are things that are true for different segments, classes, divisions of groups. And those are companies, countries, divisions, business units. And so in that bucket, how do we understand our own culture? How much should be unique versus how much should be integrated? Those are all important questions in that second bucket. And we will have to talk about that a little bit this afternoon. Up in the third bucket, we're going to talk about what's true for the individual. Me and my global leadership, me and my global mindset. What's true for me? me specifically. And when we talk about global mindset this afternoon, mostly we're going to be talking about my global mindset, what's true for me, and how can I be better. But along the way, we're going to have to talk about what are the natural divisions and silos in Alicorp that create those. Sometimes it's because of deliberate choice not to integrate acquisitions and keep the value for a certain amount of time. Sometimes it's because we just haven't done the hard push together, and sometimes it's geographic, but there are many, many issues in there. That's the messiest of them. You're going to talk even more about that tomorrow with Shazad, because the business models are usually different, and then the businesses run with a little bit different assumptions that create some of that. It's a great question.
Yes. As an Alicorp, we normally develop best practices for many processes. If we take one of these best practices and go to the other country with that, we should prepare we should adapt that best practices first to put it in that country, or we should install the process and change it, with the experience you are getting with that. What would be the best way to do it?
I've got all kinds of thoughts about that. But in the end, it's a deliberate choice that the company makes, right? So I've sat with companies who have put an instance of a new software program, whether it's Salesforce or whatever, and they've said, we'll allow regional flexibility and country level flexibility, tune it up however you want. And then they have chaos of versions and reporting. And I've seen others who said, one way, I don't care. That's it. And you know what? If our policies don't match that way, we'll change our policies. So that's a strategic choice about what's the value of standardization and localization. But in there, it's a sliding scale. I suspect you make that choice differently depending on the country and the size today. But we'll talk some more about that, because those need to be conscious choices, because when they happen by accident, it's a problem. Yeah, great question. Great, bring up the messy stuff now. Get all the real big messy stuff. Any other questions for the team? Good, there's a great distinction here we're going to talk a lot more about. Thank you for doing the work there. Right.
We have to consider and to know market and customer geography, and even the regulation, the local regulation, and even to identify opportunities for this, for the Alicorp business. This one has to take in consideration the analysis and the perspective you can get in that country, and finally the risk management to do that possible, no? As a sequence.
Is the last one risk?
Yes.
Nice.
Risk management.
Nice. So when there's something here, so this is context, broad context. This is analytics, our skills at analysis. Just we need to really understand the landscape in some detail with some deliberate and process, and then understand risk. When we talk about effective, what do we mean? What do we mean by effective? So speed for sure.
To get the objective of the business or of the process you are in that country.
So high quality decision and effective means that we get the outcome intended, that we have framed it well, and that's what we got at the end as we go through.
And this one probably is very important as well, because you should you should take contact with the information about the country, the political situation, the social, economic situation, all the information you can get to take better decisions about what you are doing.
I think that we check all the appointments and was in terms to a process of decision making more than.
And it sounds to me, I don't know, but it sounded to me like you had quite a range of comments that it was quite a range that you had spent some time trying to make clear as you came through. More than this, it looks like. Which is, I think, an interesting observation. That is, why didn't two ideas just come out? And it's probably because we don't think about decision making the same way. We don't have a common view about how we go about decisions around this group. It's just not part of our ethos. You probably learned it, and we all have a success formula, but it's not something we do together as much, is what that sounds like when you see that kind of distinction. Nice job. I want to make a couple of points. You mind?
Yes.
Yeah. So every decision, we're going to talk about this on day 3. Every decision has a framing phase. What's the question? Is it clear? Is it bounded? And then there is a divergent conversation. What's the data we need to understand the options? Then there's a debate, and then there's a convergence, and then there's action. But every decision, sometimes that takes months, sometimes that can happen in minutes. But every one says, have we framed the question? Have we examined the right alternatives in the divergent phase? Have we had the right debate? And have we been able to come to a conclusion? What's our, we say in English, what's our sweet spot? When we think about Alicorp, what do we love? Some companies love to talk about the question. Some companies love the debate. And some people just love to jump to action. Forget this. We just know. We know. Just go. What do we love? What is our style?
Debate, I guess. We're more focused on that.
We like to talk. We like to
Challenge every time.
We like to challenge. We want to make sure we understand it. And what's behind, when we do a lot of debate, what's behind it? Is it, I need to be included, I want to be part of it, or is it, I am critical, I want to make sure we got the right?
You don't want to take
A wrong
risk.
You don't want to take too much risk.
You don't want to know by heart every topic before you go.
Does that sound right?
Yes.
I think this is also a pretty interesting insight, which is
Don't fail. Yes.
don't fail. So whatever you do, don't fail. We don't want to see big mistakes. I might say to you, take some more risks, but I mean take little. Just take some little.
But I think that it's a part here to analyze if you fail, what happened.
Yes.
To learn. This is our problem.
Yeah. The learning part or the failing part?
That learning.
We want to share the responsibility as well.
Oh, yeah. So now, see.
This is a teamwork.
Yeah.
Teamwork. Result.
So when I was at Shell, one of the things we used to say that was sarcastic was, risk is something to be spread as far as possible with as many people as you can. So nobody is on point for accountability. And so there is something about how many people are involved, who has the D, who has the decision, and what's our risk ceiling? How much risk are we willing to face? Here's the thing about risk. If you are risk averse, like, let's double check, I'm not sure, then guess what's true about your teams? Right? They are twice as risk averse when they come through because we build this. And if you find that this is true, if you're hearing this and say, that sounds true, around all the businesses, then that's also a senior team that's a bit risk averse. Let's make sure, let's get the details, let's make sure we get into it. And in fact, we're going to be spending some time with them on Friday doing a short version of the decision making, of talking about some of this as well. So in here, you're starting to bring up, I think, a bunch of interesting issues, which is how clear are we on accountabilities? How broad does the conversation need to have? What is our risk ceiling? Is it, because, does this make sense how I'm talking about it? Okay, then I'm gonna switch to a leadership point here in a minute. So let's hold on to this thought about risk, because I want to talk to you about the nature of when your future is less certain versus when your future is fairly predictable. and risk, because that's going to be really important for you and how you lead your teams. Anything else here? See, it was worth the time that you guys put into it. Thank you guys so much. Thanks so much. Luigi was just saying, it's not that the company doesn't give you room to take risk or to try. It is, I'm going to not say a people problem, it's a leadership issue that we are more risk averse, that you didn't say risk averse, but you said, you didn't say we're risk averse, but you just said it's a people problem.
Probably we don't like to fail.
We don't want to fail.
It's not about the company issue.
So it's not that there are so many processes in place that choke us that we can't take risk. It's that we don't want to fail, so we check and we recheck and we, maybe not here, but some companies micromanage. And at Harley-Davidson, they micromanage like crazy. They micromanage like crazy. And it's not because they don't trust their people to be good. It's because they all love that brand. They love the work that they do. And so they can't help but keep their hands in it. They just have got to be in it. And so they end up working about 2 levels below their job title because they're right in the floor. And they want to see the bikes being built. And so it's not that it's a bad feature, it's just a step too far, that they're not giving people room to make decisions, try things, and make some mistakes. All right. How's my pace? How's my pace and speech? Slow down? Go fast? It's okay? In a world that we all grew up in, where our future was largely a reflection of our past, that is, largely the same kinds of customers, largely the same kinds of markets, largely the same kind of products. In that world, we all learned the 3 C's. Has anybody heard this before? This will be new. This is a new piece I'm working on. We all learned the 3 C's: control, consistency, and closure. Right? Control before profitability. You do good business planning. You do a good operational plan. You do good reviews. And then you manage the plan. Right? That's how we all learned. It's great business practice when your past is a reflection of a future that you can predict. So you might say, our future is X plus 10%. Our future is X plus 15%. But we largely know the kind of future we're going into. And in that world, control, consistency, and closure are your best friends. Strong processes, clear planning, super sharp. Consistency. Yeah, please. And this idea of consistency, we've all said it'd be great if we could do it the same way everywhere. There's high value in uniform application of key processes. There's high value of standardization until it starts to hurt us because it slows us down. But until then, consistency is critical. If you come out of production, if you come out of any kind of product or manufacturing environment, that is what you're taught from day one. It is the nature of the business. And then closure, that's how we all go, which is you hit the plan, you work the plan, you understand the forecast, but you work it. So those are your friends. Now, when your future is not a reflection of your past, when your future is going to be very different, when you're going to be in different markets that you don't understand as well, where there are other different competitors who do know it better, when the same products aren't going to be just right, when the same markets are not going to be just right, and the same innovation or speed cycle that we have is not going to be just right, in that future, and this is the point that you triggered for me on this decision making, which is that's a future where agility becomes important in leaders But what becomes most important is trust, purpose, and energy. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I just want to talk a few minutes about that before we go to break. In an unknown future, you have to trust people who are closest to the work because they're going to be trying things out. They're going to be adjusting and adapting. And if you try to manage that from the center, you will slow things down to the point that you can't get things done, or it won't fit and it won't work. And so, can you hear the feedback from the field, but do you trust people to make decisions at the face of the work? That's going to be crucial in an unknown future. And second, how are they guided? What are the guardrails for them? Because you just can't have them doing everything, right? So are they clear on our purpose? Do they understand who we are and what we do? Because if they're clear on purpose and you have a high degree of trust and understanding, it makes it easier to let them make those calls because they're clear about our direction. So good so far? Okay. And then this idea of energy. And so one of the observations I've had over the last 2 years is the nature of inspiration for leaders has shifted. It used to be leaders like yourselves would say, here's our future, here's where we're going, this is our strategy, here's our plan. I don't know exactly how that's going to turn out, but largely it's this path, and it's an exciting place, and here's where we are today. So you draw that gap, and you talk about a compelling future. Over here, that changes every year. That future is not what you thought it was going to be. The acquisitions you thought, the market focus could be different next year, just that short a time. And so in this world, what you see leaders saying now is, let me tell you what we stand for, and let me tell you what's important to me. Because that you can tell them. This is who we are, this is what we do, this is what's important to me, and that becomes the new anchor that inspires people. And behind that is purpose, right? I'm pretty clear about who we are as a company, and I'm pretty clear, I have a North Star about myself. So here's how we go about this. So it may not be the plan, but this is where we're going in a broader. Does that make sense? So this idea of purpose is not inconsequential. It's actually the nature of inspiration today, and that will activate people, and it will create this energy. A good friend of mine, he'll be on our reading list, robcross.org. He's probably the best in the world on networks and how groups create business value. So Rob's research a few years ago on energy said, it turns out that the amount of energy that a leader brings to their team is 3 times more predictive of that team's success than the next thing. Don't care how experienced they are. I don't care how diverse they are. I don't care how long they've known each other. Fact is, if that leader energizes that team and brings the energy, then it predicts that team's success at some extraordinary rate. And so this idea of energy also is not a minor thing. And so are we all as leaders making that shift to creating a high degree of trust for people to make decisions and make mistakes? Are we providing a compelling purpose that will allow them to guide the decisions when you're not looking? And are we energizing them? That's how we get discretionary effort. That's how they will move forward in ways that you couldn't have anticipated or thought of. Does that make sense? Pace just picked up all of a sudden. There's a lot more flip charts, messy flip charts. So as we start running into this afternoon, we'll talk about global mindset. But I did want to frame up this idea of how is the nature of leadership changing so that you can be thinking about what is in this for me. And I wanted to make sure we had this conversation on the flip charts to say, are we getting better and better aligned about how we talk and think about these important concepts that we're going to be skilled up in today? Any questions so far? Let's take a 15-minute break, and we'll come back and jump into global leadership. Thanks, everybody, for hanging in there. We'll talk to you. So what I want to do is
over the next couple of hours, the next hour and a half to 2 hours, I want to talk about the nature of global leadership. I want to get you thinking about your own global leadership. Did everybody here see the session on global leadership in Mansour? So Mansour Javan, he talked about psychological capital, social capital. He talked about some of the big elements of global leadership. So we're gonna start from those when we talk about yours, and we're gonna dig in, do a little assessment, work on those issues, have some conversations about it. It's going to be fun for me because I'm going to keep walking towards the cameraman all the whole time, and if we see as we go and we're walking through. I want to make a few points about the nature of global, why it's important, and then I want to come around to 3 big ideas around global leadership, and then we're going to get into those capitals: intellectual capital, social capital, psychological capital. First is that the world continues to globalize. If you only looked at economic indicators, you would have said, look, sometime during the global financial crisis, globalization tapered off. But the fact is, when you look at the World Globalization Index and you include social, political, when you think about the nature of globalization in a broad way, it hasn't slowed down. It's continued and continued and continued. And if you don't know the World Globalization Index, it's a nice way to say, on a 100-point scale, how global are we? On a 100-point scale, where's the world going? Where are different countries going? Some countries, like the Netherlands, some US, the UK, they'll be in the 90s. That's a high degree of globalization, import-export. Some other countries are lower as you go through the mix. But around the world, as I say, when you only look at economics, you might have thought, well, global is slowing down. It's just not the case. But when we truly take a full picture, globalization continues at a steady rate. And you know this story already. Even if you think you're protected in your region, global is coming to you. The competitors will come. It's not just about you stepping out. Second is, world exports have tripled. When we really look at the amount of exports, you'll see that dip during the financial crisis, but then right back up. When we think about how much time and goods and services are moving across borders, it continues to rise. And then finally, it was actually, when you thought about what were called advanced economies, or the big economies, when you thought about GDP coming, and then where were the emerging market and developing economy GDPs, those lines crossed a long time ago, sometime around 2006. There's a lot more GDP coming out of the emerging market developing economies, and it continues to go up. And GDP of those advanced economies are leveling off or going down. That's an old story, right? That's a story that's over a decade old now. So the point is, there has been a wave of nationalism in different countries. There has been some border protection. I come from a tariff country, apparently, in the current administration. That isn't helpful, but globalization continues. It is not abating, it's not slowing down. And so, when I talk about global leadership, when I start shifting us to your global leadership, your global presence expands your opportunity to innovate. If you can see and you can capture the opportunities, they're there. The trends that impact the growth of your business, they come to you. And what you see today is organizations hire the most productive talent wherever they are. You look at P&G, you look at the big companies, the talent is everywhere in the world, and they are, in fact, I took an organization recently to Silicon Valley for 2 days, the senior team, and we went to LinkedIn, and it was an insurance company, QBE. So I had the CEO and the CEO's team, and we were going to talk to LinkedIn about their how they retain people, how they think about their talent. But the first thing the senior leadership at LinkedIn said to the QBE executives were, Wouldn't you like to know where the biggest pools of underwriters in the world are? Because we'll tell you exactly. We'll tell you where all the underwriters are, who are particularly not in the big cities. Would that be interesting for you? And of course, they were like, that'd be very interesting for us, because we love to go find that talent. So this is not a small thing. Is global allows you to get the talent you don't have, things that would slow you down. By contrast, I did some work for a bank in Qatar, and they were talking about regional expansion, but they could not get any leaders to leave the country. They could not get any leaders to go to other countries and open up their operations, and it stopped their growth like a hammer. So this cross-border talent piece is a really big deal, tied directly to growth. People look for it, people want to be involved in it, and for ourselves, our ability to manage and lead global teams is always in need of a tune-up. Our ability to take those different views, to understand those cultural views, and not just drop into those our normal success formulas is always a capability for us to tune up. All right. So I'm going to put you in a conversation in just a moment. I want to talk about the stages of globalization. I'm going to talk you through the stages that companies go through, and then I'm going to ask you, where is Alicorp today, and where are they going when we talk about the stages of globalization. And I think what we'll do is, just to have a broader conversation, is that we'll just have you turn around and just treat this as one side, and we'll have you guys turn around and just treat this as a second team for that conversation. Most companies start here. They start as a domestic company somewhere. There's a single market focus. It tends to be a domestic or a local workforce. There's a pretty strict hierarchy. You know who's boss, and the home culture dominates. Right? Most companies start here from somewhere. Nike is a Portland-based company. When it started, it was about white male runners from Oregon State University. They made running shoes, and then they went national, and then they went global. But most companies start here. Harley-Davidson is a Milwaukee-based motorcycle company, and then they went national, and then there's some version of trade that happens. Second stage of globalization is growth is pursued with known partners outside your home market. We know some people in Europe were going to expand. That was Harley's move to Europe. They made an acquisition of an Italian superbike company and used that to get into the markets in Europe. Home culture largely dominates, and there is some limited global mobility. We may send a few people out into those markets. Third stage is multi-domestic. You start tailoring your products to individual countries, right? Your product mix changes. The innovation comes more from local R&D. You have experts on the ground who know this market now, and you control the firm's core competencies in the headquarters still. It's not a globalized function. R&D is not a global function, but you do have experts in the market. Does this make sense? And then you understand these other cultures, and the importance of you understanding that becomes more and more and more important. Then there's multinational. But in multinational, your workforce is more multinational. The matrix, this is when you can't have traditional hierarchies. When you go to multinational, you're going to have some matrix. They're either going to be business by function, they're going to be region by business, but you're going to have to deal with a matrix organization at this point. The diffusion of power and responsibility happens here. Decision-making happens more in the region or local level than down here. You have to let go. The center can't control everything once you're here. ABB. You can see ABB had spent a lot of time here, and then started building from local R&D understanding of their product sets for local markets to get to here, and then started doing a different kind of a decision-making model than they traditionally had. And then finally, really, truly global companies see the world as one market. They see it as one big risk pool that they make bets in, but they have enough range and review to look across. They have the highest degree of diffusion of power. You could have R&D in China, and you could have customer service in the Philippines, and you could have something else in wherever. But where the expertise is not in the home headquarters. And value creation and core competencies are dispersed throughout the world. You're used to working in that big matrix. So, not every company needs to go all the way up here. Most don't, but they are somewhere along the way. Does the idea make sense? So what I'd like you to do then is, if you think about this, let me make this point about skills. When you're in domestic and trade, then this is the 3 C's. The 3 C's are what makes your life worth living, right? Because it's about fundamentals: finance, marketing, and strategy, sales and analytics, management, communication. We know this, it's our market, we're going to knock out the basics. When you start getting up into here, in the upper right, then global business acumen. Do I actually understand the hurdle rates across Alicorp's countries? Do I understand that there are different mixes of business models for different reasons? Do I have that? Global mindset, global project leadership and collaboration, and diversity and inclusion. Am I open enough to hear very different ideas, or do I have to go with the one way? So the skill set changes for leaders as you shift to the right as well. So where's Alicorp today? Where are we moving towards? And how fast is that? When do you think that's going to be? Now, last time we talked about main competitors. When we had that conversation in the room, it was like pretty much everybody. Because it depends on what business and what market, they were everywhere, all over the place. But if there are some interesting observations about competitors, let's make those. But the 2 questions are, where are we today, where are we going, and about how long in the time frame. Is that the question clear? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so let's get in your groups and start the conversation. Where are we today in our stage of globalization, and where are we going?
Revisando con el equipo en qué etapa nos encontramos, llegamos al consenso de que estamos en el multidoméstico. De hecho, sentimos que de los 4 topics que podemos revisar, uno está en trabajo, sentimos que los 3 primeros ya están plenamente desarrollados, en otro caso están bastante afianzados para nosotros, pero el cuarto es una de las razones por las cuales hoy sentimos que estamos acá sentados, ¿no? Es este tema de entendimiento de otras culturas y la importancia, ¿no?, de mejorarlas efectivamente. Y la idea, o nos vemos en el mediano plazo, o en el mediano largo plazo, siendo una multinacional, donde sentimos que la brecha más importante que hoy tenemos, mirado desde multidoméstico a multinacional, es que nos falta una mayor autonomía en términos de toma de decisiones, una mayor descentralización en la toma de decisiones, y en realidad era eso, era una de las principales razones por las cuales todavía no nos sentíamos como una multinacional.
Nice. So if I say this correctly, today your view is we're multi-domestic, moving towards multinational. And there is this question about some of the cross-cultural differences that we all could be stronger at, but also just hard decision-making decentralization is going to be required to make that shift when we come over. Does everybody agree? But they're being pretty nice about it as we go. Excellent. How about over here? Please.
Nosotros hemos analizado el punto de vista de que Alicorp es una mezcla de negocios. Tenemos 3 tipos de negocios y dependiendo del tipo de negocio somos en promedio multidomésticos, ¿no? Y el negocio de alimento balanceado está multidoméstico tendiendo más a multinacional, y el negocio de consumo masivo multidoméstico, y el negocio de Alicorp Soluciones no sale todavía del país. Desde el punto de vista geográfico, la pregunta que le hicimos al profesor, relacionado con, digamos, el hecho de ser multidomésticos, ¿qué países abarcaría? El hecho de ser multinacional, ¿qué países abarcaría? Y de acuerdo a nuestra realidad, o sea, nosotros estamos en países latinoamericanos, por lo tanto entraríamos más en la definición de multidomésticos. No sé si alguien quiere aclarar algo. ¿No? Sí.
So,
That's all.
so it sounds to me like for mass consumption, we're somewhere in here. It sounds like we could be we could argue at this point around here. Are we still moving? Multinational? Is the timeline longer, or is it just going to be it's just a regional play?
No en el corto plazo. No en el corto plazo. Tenemos idea a mediano y largo plazo, hablando de negocio de Vita Pro. Tal vez están haciendo análisis de estar en el mercado asiático, pero el foco actual es en el mercado multidoméstico, Latinoamérica.
So the horizon is long. So if we're going here, it's years away.
Years away.
Sí, una pregunta que surgió fue si una empresa como Alicor puede tener uno de sus negocios a nivel multinacional y si eso lo hace una empresa multinacional, o si el no ser toda la empresa multinacional evita que alguna de sus unidades de negocio se convierta en multinacional.
Yeah. So everybody, does that make sense to everybody? That's a great question. I think that was a question, right? I'm going to keep breaking all your stuff as we go.
You have
So this, to me, this was the question that we talked about in the decision-making conversation, where we said, if we are really a global, but in one business and not everybody has a good understanding of that, are we really global as a company, right? Because you can't be. So you can have businesses that are the point of the wedge, they're leading the way, but if everybody's not there, you can't be there. So, and it works like this. If part of this conversation we're going to have next is global companies have the ability to choose to go compete in a market whenever they want. And so they can choose to be a threat whenever they want. If you're not all global and you're not all aligned, it's hard to do that, right? You can compete in one line. So I would say it makes perfect sense that part of the business leads the way and that the others draft behind it. But if everybody doesn't come along, it's hard for you to use the muscle of being a powerful global entity, right? If you're not truly multinational and we know how to operate in very different kinds of markets, it's hard to create that leadership skill that makes us able to move talent, to go capitalize on emerging opportunities in different markets if everybody's not there. Time and time again, I think we see that, which is what you don't want is like you don't want an international unit. And you don't only want a small set of high potentials who do all the cross-border stuff. We want a broader set of leaders who know markets and who can move across markets when you need. So, all to say, you need a lot of global mindset. You need relatively few global mobile leaders. You don't need everybody that can go across borders all the time, right? But you need everybody to be thinking about the broader global context. So global mindset, yes, even if you're in Peru, you live in Peru, and you're going to stay in Peru, still you have to understand the world we operate on. And there's a small number of people who actually will do the travel. Will do the move. Yes, please.
We have some examples about the difference between a multinational and a global company. Maybe, I don't know, Nike or Microsoft. I don't know really difference.
Yeah.
About the difference between multinational and global.
So, What'll be interesting, and you'll dig into this more tomorrow, and Shazad will do comparisons of companies who have different business models. So if you look at Exxon and Shell, or that's Shell. Exxon tends to be a US company. Everything happens in the US for the most part. High command and control hierarchy. The field, the global units do not have a lot of control. And if you look at Shell, they actually have globalized functions and globalized from R&D to finance to customer service. So they're much more globalized, and decision making happens at the point of the deals. And so what you'll find is when both companies are competing to be an operator in, say, Qatar Gas in the Middle East, the Exxon people have to check back with headquarters. The Shell people, the decision makers are in the room. They can make the decision right there on the ground. And so it seems like a small difference, but it's actually the difference between here and here. And Exxon does just fine, right? In fact, Exxon, you know what Exxon says about sustainability? I'm going to be a smart ass, but Exxon says, you know, if that wind power gets to be a big deal, we'll go buy some. If that wave power gets to be a big deal, we'll go buy some, but right now we're an oil company. And Shell would say, we're an energy company, and we spend a lot of time thinking about the many little pots of investments we make, so we have expertise in those areas in our global operations. So different cultures that can have strong business results, but they have made a choice about crossing this line or not. Procter & Gamble. Do you think Cargill is global? What's Cargill? Is Cargill multinational or global? Multinational. Right? You know where decisions are made. You know where the center sits. It's pretty clear. Somewhere in the coldest state in the United States, up in Minnesota.
You know what to look for.
I have a question.
Y el licor debería de tener un...
Thank you.
El licor debería de tener un roadmap con actividades, objetivos, tiempos para pasar de un multidoméstico a un multinacional, o esta evolución se va a dar en forma natural.
That's a strategic choice. To me, that's a speed question. My guess is, as you make acquisitions, it happens naturally, and you'll integrate naturally. And then the choice for you is, do we need to move faster? Then it becomes a strategy. So we say, we will integrate. So DuPont, right now, if you look at DuPont, they are creating a new culture because of this massive acquisition they just made. And they are deliberately saying, we will put in place roadmaps and structures to move fast to become a new company. And we're going to do it in 9 months. So do we have that kind of investment time and energy? Do we want to do that? They could have let it go over time, but they're going to choose to drive it. So it'll happen naturally, and then along the way, you'll make some choices about how fast do we need to go. You're going, salsa's in North America, in the United States. One of the last, I'm going to get this fixed by the 3rd day, I promise. With the growth assignment in the last class is, for the last group like this, we know how to do it traditionally. How else can we do it? How fast, could we go faster? Could we be deliberate about how we go into the Americas? And how else might we try it in a way we know? And when we talk about your growth assignments, this is the question that's going to come up, Jaime, which is how could we be 10x in that market and not 2x? Our current plans and the ways we know will define a natural path that we understand. But if we're going to move fast, you're going to have to be deliberate. And then I think timelines, plans, key steps, all the way you go. How you guys doing? Are you okay? Please.
Sí, yo te pregunto. Cuando Licor trata de hacer una multinacional y hay ciertos checklist de condiciones que debería de cumplir, ¿cuáles son las principales condiciones que deberíamos de asegurar para poder crecer?
I think one of the things we'll talk about on day 3 is what are the decisions you have to make to do it? How do you frame those decisions? Because what's going to happen in that shift to multinational is you have to pick a few backbone processes that are standard. And what often happens with people that make that shift to multinational is they bury themselves in process density. Everything's got to have a binder, everything's got to have a book, there's got to be 40 different, from approving travel to buying a pencil, right? And the quickest way to kill yourself on that move to multinational is to try and standardize or get processes in place for everything. So you pick, there's a strategic choice about backbone processes. What drives the business? Is it CRM? Is it manufacturing? And what is it? What are those core processes that are the backbone? And then, how much freedom to vary is there in the local markets? What's standard and what's local? So those are strategic choices that have to be framed right, and they're decisions that have to be made. So I won't say there's a long list, because you guys will be good at making the right long lists. But the real strategic choices are, what are the few things that must be done everywhere that cap risk, create growth, and don't stifle, right, the speed. And of course, digital has interconnected everything, so it's got its own whole messiness about what does that mean for us. Good question. So we're multi-domestic going to multinational. How, if I said that to your teams, would they say, yeah, that's right? I recognize that. I get that. Sometimes I find the distance between you and the next level of leadership is great. That this tends to be local leaders who are experts at something in a particular silo, and you tend to look across things more often. And so one of the interesting things that will be important for you to think about is how big is the distance between my level and the next level, because that's actually going to define how fast you can move. Some people call the level below you the frozen middle, and I would say unfair. They're not frozen because they don't want to change. If they're frozen, it's usually because the gap is large. They don't see the broader picture. They aren't thinking broadly about the enterprise. But one of the interesting questions for you will be, how big is the gap between me and the teams? Where should they pull up? They will have their academy time, but it'll be interesting for you to understand how big a gap that is. Is everybody okay? We're going to freestyle and talk about the things you want to talk about, and if you get bored, you just say, look, move along, guy, and I'll move us as we go. So remember, I started talking about this idea of, do you start from a position that says, take the best of local and scale and go global? Or do we start from a position that says, go global, set the standards, and then decide how much local and adaptation we want to play with? On this side, when we go global to local, that's Harley-Davidson, Cisco, Microsoft, right? They pick global product platform, global, and then small adaptations. When you look on the right side, that is, do you know Cemex in Mexico? Right? So the ability to move cement before it hardens in the traffic of Mexico City turns out to be a differentiated capability. How do you get it on time to someplace that travels across borders pretty well? But it is just one of those, we know cement and we know logistics, it turns out. And so they start thinking local and then they build that across borders. Standard Bank in South Africa, we know emerging market banking. Right? It's a capability they have that starts local and goes broader, but it's not a global standard immediately imposed. It is built through learning and goes more global that way. I think I had another, and probably AB InBev. You think about making beer in different markets and how that comes in, but there are some interesting that move the other way. So what do you think? What do? Do we set global standards? and that allows some flexibility, or are we local to global? Local to global. We build, we understand this market, we export what works to nearby markets, and we keep moving that way. Which is better? That's my answer. Depends. Yeah, so I think one is it's important to know where we start and how we think about our business when we think about decision making, or when we think about business acumen and value creation tomorrow. That is our strategy. It has been our strategy. And then second, the trick question here is you'll have to do both now. You can't rely on one. You'll have to take both sides. You'll have to get your mindset to a place where you have the capability to enter any market you choose to compete in. That's how you become a threat. That's how you have strategic optionality for your decisions. So, as a global company, you want to have that capability to enter any market, and you then can be constantly looking for market opportunities, processing information, becoming a threat to competitors, but also it gives you that sensing you need in the environment. And then finally, it's how you'll take advantage of worldwide resources in competitive situations. The QBE example, where are the underwriters in the world? They can't grow because they don't have underwriting skill. They've had to say, you know what, we just can't buy them from London and Australia anymore. And so they're making a move to being a much more global structure, allows them the freedom to pull the talent and grow when they need to grow, and find critical talent when they need it. The point makes sense? Am I beating this into the ground, or is this okay? I'm a big believer in tacit consent. That means if you don't say anything, I'm going to believe you're all with me, and we're in full understanding as we go. All right. Let's go here. Who knows this term VUCA? VUCA. All right, this is a term that came out of the military, actually, in the 1970s. And the term is, the future is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. There are 4 different ideas, but they all describe complexity, right, and ambiguity. So VUCA is this term that said the future is going to be volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so what I want to talk about is, we started saying, where are we in the world? Where's our business model? What is our stage of globalization? Let's come down to the leadership question of how do you lead in a VUCA world where the nature, the speed and volumes of the issues you face change. So volatility, to me, when I think of volatility, I don't know about you, but for the last several years, I've never ended a year where I thought I would. It's just been, things have happened and things have changed. Uncertainty, the things that we used to rely on to predict the future no longer predict it the same way. We use certain metrics, we look at certain things, they don't predict the way they used to. And complexity is particularly, whatever your flavor of digital pain and misery is, whenever you think about digital as it applies to your business, those things are all interconnected. So what is the nature of IoT in retail and products, for example? But these things are highly complex, and so therefore the cause and effect, when we talk on day 3 about decision making, the relationship between the decisions we make and the outcomes we see are complex now. There are many intervening variables. And then finally, ambiguity. People interpret the conditions of the market differently. People interpret the customer feedback more differently than ever before. So VUCA. So here is the leadership point that I want to make about VUCA. These are the antidotes. If you live in a VUCA world, the antidote to volatility, is vision. That is that clear-cut statement Remember we talked about the idea that here's what we stand for, right? Here's what's important to me, here's what we stand for. The antidote to volatility is some form of vision and where people's intent is understood. In the military, they have this concept of commander's intent, right? So the generals and colonels have commander's intent, and they practice this all the time, and that is, if you understand my intent, then you are free to act. I'm not going to control your moves, I can't do it. So commander's intent says, if you understand where I need to get to, you're going to decide exactly how, but I'm not going to tell you. The antidote to uncertainty is understanding. Can you stop, look, and listen? How will you get fresh perspectives and remain flexible? When we, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about your global leadership, your global mindset. But one of the things I'm going to tell you is, what's the Peruvian version of McDonald's here? Nando's. Yeah, if you like Nando's every day at 12 o'clock all day, and you always order the same thing, then global is going to be hard for you. It's going to be, if you like that kind of consistency and predictability, it's going to be tough for you personally. And so when we talk about stop, look, and listen, get fresh perspectives, and remain flexible, we're going to talk some more about if you hate surprises, if you don't like to be surprised on your birthday, if you're not curious about why does that work here but not in Bolivia, then you're going to have to understand that about yourself when we talk about your global leadership, your global mindset. Stop, look, and listen, get fresh perspectives, and remain flexible. On complexity, the antidote is clarity. How can you help people make sense of chaos? In the world of complexity, you'll often hear leaders listen, and then they'll say some version of, what's the first next step? They're not going to fix the whole thing. They're not going to tell you the answer. What's the first next step? Can I just get you to make a move forward? It's a complex picture. It's messy. Well, what's the first next step? How do we collaborate with others and stop seeking permanent solutions? If we think we're going to fix it once and for all, we're going to be sorely disappointed for the rest of our careers. When we talk about paradox, we're going to say, look, profitable growth is a little bit of a pendulum. You make different choices at different times, and you move in different directions. You don't just lock it down in one place. And the antidote to ambiguity is agility. Can you move quickly? Do I have people around me who think divergently, who can think about little wins, can move us forward and learn as we go? That's going to be the nature of winning in an ambiguous world. So, you'll hear me say this over and over again. VUCA is not getting stuck in an endless loop of I can't do anything, it's impossible, we can't make any moves. It's make the best decision you can until it's time to make another one. And it's probably going to be sooner than you wish, but you're going to have to keep making better decisions as you learn and move forward. Any questions about VUCA? There's, you'll see some resources on it. It is really worth your time to think a bit about where am I? Where am I in my leadership journey? Am I about the consistency, or am I pretty curious and open? Am I really open to hearing new things from different people, or does it kind of annoy me? Me, personally, I'm on the fence. Sometimes it annoys me, and sometimes when I'm at my best self, I'm pretty open. When I'm really under pressure, I don't want to hear a whole bunch of options, right? But in here, you know yourself. Please.
My question is, we can use the same behaviors, for example, when we try with our suppliers, because we belong to the global as a customers as well, and we have to create, we have to be in contact with our suppliers. We can use the same behaviors.
Exactly. And so in here, I think this is a fantastic point. That is, this isn't just about your teams, right? Because your borders are only going to become more transparent, and you're only going to partner more. You're not going to be able to limit yourselves to X number of suppliers, X number of partners. So this stuff applies to your teams and the people you interact with outside. one of the real interesting examples you're going to talk with Shahzad about tomorrow is he'll talk about Apple in their supply chain, and who makes all the money. But it is suppliers, it is third-party integrators. There's a whole bunch of people that make an Apple device that's not Apple, right? And they think about that as a system, and this stuff applies across the patch. Yeah.